A very good evening all. I'm Aditi Lamba with the Wednesday night edition of South Asian News. Welcome to Vision of Asia, Voice of Our Community. We are coming to you from our studio in New York City. Here's what's happening tonight in the coronavirus pandemic. Globally, we are looking at more than 1 million deaths from the novel virus with nearly 36 million cases. The United States has surpassed 7.5 million cases of COVID-19 with at least 211,000 deaths. Most states are seeing a spike in cases. 9 months into the pandemic, we continue to see almost 39 states reporting COVID-19 cases, with current COVID-19 records being set in states Alaska, Indiana, Kansas, Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. Wisconsin is struggling with the most and worst COVID-19 outbreaks in the country currently. And here in New York, once the global epicenter hotspot, Governor Andrew Cuomo is working to control the flaring up of cases in New York City under the Cluster Action Initiative. By Friday, some areas will see schools, non-essential businesses, and houses of worship shut down, and others may face limits of indoor dining and mass gatherings. On vaccine, there are currently 4 COVID-19 vaccines in phase 3 clinical trials here in the nation: Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. Of those, the furthest along is the Pfizer vaccine. And on the White House and President Donald Trump's COVID-19 recovery, more than a dozen people close to the president have now contracted coronavirus in recent days. On President's health, White House physician Sean Connolly today said that the president has no COVID-19 symptoms for the last 24 hours and that the president has been fever-free for more than 4 days since his initial hospitalization. Meanwhile, tonight, Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Senator Kamala Harris will face off in their only debate of 2020. Both have tested negative for COVID-19, and issues such as the White House COVID-19 outbreak, the economy, immigration, racial unrest are all on the front stage up for debate. What are your thoughts on the upcoming November 3rd elections, and what issues matter to you? We'd like to reach out to political leaders, activists, and the greater community for your response to what matters the most in this election. Email us on events@itvgold.com. With that, let's begin tonight's episode highlighting more on COVID-19 and South Asian influencers. Here are the headlines. ISAAW presents virtual panel discussion on impact of COVID-19 on South Asian American communities, New Jersey. Simran Jeet Singh on Fauja Singh keeps going and Sikh Americans, New York City. Priyanka Chopra's psychological thriller Evil Eye releases October 13th on Amazon Prime, featuring actress Sarita Chaudhary. A lot more on the other side of the break. Stay with us in Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be back shortly. Welcome again, I'm Aditi Lamba, and this is Vision of Asia, Wednesday night episode of South Asian News. Looking at the impact of COVID-19 and its measures, recently SALT, South Asian Americans Leading Together nonprofit, released a report stating the disparate impact of COVID-19 across South Asian Americans, highlighting the urgent need for funders and policymakers to gather accurate data on the communities in the U.S. and their struggles. The report shared that South Asian Americans are vulnerable to the disease currently and are at high risk with heart diseases and diabetes if they contract COVID-19, along with several mental health challenges. So what do we need to know about our own communities and the ramifications of COVID-19? We have tonight highlights from a virtual press conference discussion presented by Inspiring South Asian American Women. Known as ISAAW, the organization creates a platform for South Asian American women interested in greater civic engagement, increasing awareness on issues impacting the voice of women of our diaspora. The virtual panel discussion saw a discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on South Asian American communities and the importance of contact tracing within. Here is the story.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Suchitra Kamath, and I'm the president of Inspiring South Asian American Women, also called ISAAW. ISAAW was founded in 2017 to create a platform for South Asian American women interested in greater civic engagement. At ISAAW, we are driven by a single mission to empower South Asian American women. As part of our mission, we strive to increase awareness on issues impacting the South Asian American community, especially women. We help mobilize South Asian American women to increase their involvement in public service. And at the end of the day, diverse voices only strengthen democracy.
Hetal, can you tell our listeners what this COVID period has been like for you as a doctor, an OBGYN, right on the front lines?
So, thank you firstly to ISAAW and all esteemed panelists to take time out on a Sunday evening. As an OBGYN, as a practicing OBGYN, we work very closely in a very close spaces, be it operating room, be it labor and delivery, and you are in that room for hours sometimes. So even though we had some, since February, I've been talking on my show as well as other TV shows about this COVID-19 or novel coronavirus, and we've been talking, but we didn't have a lot of information at that point, right? And even though we took our precautions, I did get it in early March, and I did suffer from COVID. Luckily for us, though, as an OBGYN, the disease has not impacted pregnant women as much as we would have anticipated because they are immunocompromised, their immunity is down. So that has been a really good kind of observation, as well as people who are immunocompromised because of the medication or because of having, say, cancer, etc. They haven't been affected as much. What we have seen that high-risk population are definitely the elderly, definitely people with comorbidity. Obesity has come out to be one of the most important kind of like a marker where people have had bad outcomes due to COVID and obesity. Hypertension, diabetes, these are some of the kind of risk factors. And we as a South Asians, we have a really high incidences of diabetes, about high blood pressure, cardiovascular risk factors, obesity, etc. So we as the South Asians, that's why we are a little bit at a higher risk of COVID because of this risk and comorbidities that I mentioned. Apart from that, a lot of us are still in a very joint family module, right? And that's why the South Asians come out to be a little bit different, because we are living with our elderly people, our elderly folks, younger 2-3 generations staying together, two brothers along with their kids and their parents living together. So we still have that joint family module, even in United States, where compared to the other ethnicity where the parents live alone or the parents are in nursing home or long-term care, we Indian South Asians, we tend to keep our elderlies in our home. So that puts a big challenge to COVID. So these are the few factors for South Asians that we should keep in mind: comorbidities, the family structures, as well as the other factors which makes it at higher risk. So I'll touch upon the other things as we go along, but those were the few highlights as a clinician that I wanted to make sure that our listeners, our viewers are getting that kind of important, as well as the policymakers, because we are slightly different than the regular folks. So there is this family dilemma, the social dilemma, they have to take into consideration while they are making policies.
We now have a get-to-know segment featuring Simran Jeet Singh on his new children's book, Fauja Singh Keeps Going. An American educator, writer, and activist, Simran Jeet Singh has been known for his take on Sikh American identity, religion, racism, and justice, with his new children's book now trying to normalize the Sikh community into the greater diaspora. Published by Penguin Random House, Fauja Singh Keeps Going is the true story of Fauja Singh, who broke world records to become the first 100-year-old to run a marathon. A story about Sikh resilience, determination, and commitment, the Fauja Singh Keeps Going surely shares invaluable lessons for children in America to never give up and embrace one's own identity and its articles of faith. With text by Simran Jeet Singh and illustrations by Baljinder Kaur, the book aims to remind all that it's born where we start and how we finish, that our journeys are unforgettable. Here is what Simran Jeet Singh shared with us on Fauja Singh Keeps Going. Simran Jeet Singh, welcome to ITV Gold. I hope you're doing well today.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
Of course, it's so good to have you here with us to discuss your book, Fauja Singh Keeps Going, but also a lot on embracing the Sikh American identity while we're having this conversation. So let's dig right into it. Such a great name, Fauja Singh Keeps Going. What is this book about? What can you tell us? Give us a little insight into it.
Yeah, well, it's thank you for having me. It's a book about Fauja Singh, who is the oldest person to ever run a marathon. And it's a biography. It's a story of his life. And it's a story about perseverance and resilience and never giving up. But it's more than that. It's also a story that helps us open our minds to people who are different from us. Fauja Singh is an elderly person. In our culture, we refer to as buzurg. But in Western culture, we don't really pay respect to our elders, and we don't think about them as our heroes. But Fauja Singh's story really reminds us of the amazing things that our elders have to offer us in our world. It's a story about someone who's dealt with disability. Again, we don't think of those who are disabled as equally human, but Fauja Singh reminds us through his story that they deserve our respect just as much as anyone else. So a lot of these things that he encounters in his life, racism, immigration and xenophobia, the fact that he never learned to read or write, a lot of them challenge our stereotypes and our kids' stereotypes of what it means to be a hero. And I think that, to me, is the real power of this book.
You are an activist and an educator, and, you are also a father. I know the story behind what really inspired you to write this book, but I would love for you to share that.
Yeah, sure. So, I grew up in Texas, and there were no Sikhs or Punjabis or Desis anywhere, anywhere where we lived. And so it felt very lonely to me. And the fact that there were no books or TV shows or cartoons that had people from our culture represented, that was really painful for me as a child. And so when my daughter was born, and I started noticing these things all over again, that, there were no books for her, there were no movies for her. That's when I promised myself that I would write this book. And the Fauja Singh aspect, to me, he is a personal hero of mine. He changed my life, actually. The day that he finished the marathon at the age of 100 was the same day that I started running my own marathon. I signed up for my first marathon that day. And so he's changed my life. He's done so many things for me. There are so many important lessons for him to share with our children, and the kinds of things that I really want my girls to grow up with, to know that they can do anything, to have inner confidence and not worry about what other people say, to never give up. Like, all of those things are so important to me as a father. And I think a lot of parents are looking for those kinds of lessons.
What does it do to a child when they do not see themselves represented in children's book, according to you?
Well, children's books are like windows and mirrors. A lot of people use that phrase. And what they mean by that is by seeing characters positively represented in children's books, it allows our kids to imagine themselves as being heroes of their own lives, right? So let me give you an example. I know so many Sikh children who have never seen Sikh superheroes, Sikh athletes, and it becomes very hard for them to imagine that they can do something at that level or in that way, just because it's not part of their understanding of the world. One of my nephews, who is incredible at golf, we were talking once, and he said, I asked him, I said, it would be so amazing if you went pro, that you were a professional golfer. And he said, I can't, I wear a turban. And I said, what does your turban have to do with that? And he said, I don't know, I've never seen anybody golf with a turban before. And it's these limitations that we put on ourselves, but they're very much real. And so to help kids open up their imaginations and to see themselves, it creates real confidence and pride in who they are, and it instills real confidence.
It's time for the short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be back shortly. And welcome again. This is Vision of Asia, the South Asian news segment, and I am Aditi Lamba. Now we have an ITV Gold exclusive featuring upcoming American psychological horror thriller, Evil Eye. Releasing on October 13th by Amazon Studios and Blumhouse TV, Evil Eye has been directed by Ellen Dasani and Rajiv Dasani with executive producers Priyanka Chopra Jonas and Jason Blum, and is being released as a part of Welcome to the Blumhouse collection of spine-chilling thrillers developed with an eye towards original genre telling. The movie depicts a perfect romance which turns into a nightmare when a mother, performed by actress Sarita Chaudhary, becomes convinced that her daughter's new boyfriend has a dark and mysterious connection to her own past. The film proudly features an all-South Asian cast and is created on traditional Indian mysticism and modern paranoia. A very exciting thriller. We spoke with lead actress of Evil Eye, Sarita Chaudhary, on her experience and her take on South Asians in the American film industry. Here is Sarita Chaudhary. Sarita Chaudhary, welcome to ITV Gold. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Yes, of course. And we have you here to talk to us about none other than Evil Eye. What a fantastic movie. So thrilling, such a psychological horror film. So my first question to you has to be, how did you adhere to your character who had so many shades and had a lot of journey to go through in this entire movie? How did you sort of, go at the character?
Yeah, she's a complicated character because I really wanted to start the movie being very almost traditional, and the mother who's slightly overbearing, really protective of her daughter. And then as her past is revealed and these secrets come out, then slowly the person she was in the past kind of comes into the present in her body, like in a way. And so I really wanted to pull both off and make you believe that they're all the same person. It's just she never was able to tell her truth before.
Yeah. What were some of the most challenging aspects of this movie when you were filming it? What did you really have to overcome to really make the character super authentic?
There was a point where I remember thinking, okay, don't fixate on, is the sari right? Is my accent right? Am I cooking the dal in the right way? There came a point where I thought the only way I'm going to do this authentically is if I have fun with this and make this character who I think she's someone who could have had a different life. And now maybe later in life, she's able to start having that life. And so I let go of, after doing all the research, I was like, I don't care. I need her to breathe. And I remember thinking, oh, this may not work out. But yeah, it did.
What's really interesting about this movie, Sarita, is the fact that it's female-centered. Primarily, it's about the mother-daughter relationship and what your character's primarily goes through, but it's also fully South Asian. But it's Indian-American in culture. How amazing did that feel to have a movie such as that, where we just normalize the character? These characters could have been anyone, but these were South Asians.
So
How
true.
does that make you feel?
I think that was one of the most exciting things about it is we don't explain anything. Like you just begin the movie and you're either in Delhi or you're in my daughter's house in New Orleans. And I love that we never explained anything. And I felt what you just asked me, which was, oh, we're South Asians in a film that is such a universal theme, but we're not hiding our South Asianness. It was such a great combination.
Yeah, of course. I can only imagine that. While I still have you here, I want to discuss a couple of scenes of the movie if we can. What was some of the most, when you were describing the incident to your daughter and when that entire thing gets revealed of what has happened in the past, how did you prepare for, scenes such as that? Because those are very serious.
Those were hard because also I'm talking on the phone.
Yeah.
And I'm reliving a past that I, Sarita, haven't had. And the words were so, it's odd to say, but for trauma, the words were so beautiful in that they were truthful, but also they were describing, like, I tell my daughter that I'm walking on a certain road as this man is following me. I tell her the bridge. I describe things, and I remember thinking, oof, I have to be very careful not to get swept up in this story, because this story is my story. And I remember practicing telling stories of my past just to get that right tone, or that feeling of how hard it is sometimes to tell someone that you love something about your past.
Definitely. You know, the movie is very thrilling and it's kind of chilling at the same time. How important was it for the creators and you to not make it necessarily super horror, but to have like a thrilling aspect to it where you're basically wondering the whole time what is going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I feel like we shot this movie as if it was a normal independent movie where the plot at times turns a certain way. And we had to keep track of, like, if I had a moment where I was like, oh no, I had to really be real in being shocked, but also I didn't want to overplay it because so much more was coming. And I remember thinking, in real life, when we're shocked or something huge happens, sometimes we go really quiet and our temperature changes. And I just remember thinking, I need to play this out slowly. So by the end, and I don't want to give away the end,
yes,
that allows for the big explosion.
Yes. I was so shocked in the end, I have to say, and I hope all of the viewers of ITV Gold watch it on October 13th. That is all the time I have for you today, Sarita. I would love for you to give one last message to our South Asian audience.
Well, first of all, I'm so proud. Like, I feel like Blumhouse, did that movie Get Out, which I loved. And when they wanted this movie, I remember just thinking, oh, this is a movie for all of us South Asians. And I'm just glad to share it with you all. And I feel very moved and proud to bring this story to a worldwide audience.
Yes, of course. We are super, super, super proud of you and all of the actors in the movie. And that is all for tonight's show. Remember to send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook @itvgold. You can also now subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch many of our popular shows for free. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.